Hello, board game brothers and sisters.
I'm Adam Singer, and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching on Kickstarter and Gamefound over the next week. If you're new to the channel, we do this every week going over all the upcoming campaigns, so if you want to stay up to date, this is the place to be. But before we get started, I do like to go over some news and announcements that I just found out about. I do have a few things to let you know about. The first one is that there has been a bunch of new announcements from Awakened Realms. The first one I want to mention is that they have a new campaign coming up called Lands of Evershade, and this is going to be their next big campaign game that's going to have RPG elements, and of course that does include a story that's going to give you a similar sort of experience like you might have had with Tainted Grail. But you can go ahead and check out this campaign page now. It is up, but they don't have a launch date yet. But if you're more interested just in the combat rather than a lengthy campaign, they also announced Grimcoven, which is a boss battler set in a Victorian universe. I don't have a whole lot of info on this one yet, but it should be coming in the next quarter here. And of course, I will be going into much more detail with both of these games during the week of their launch, so make sure to subscribe down below if you haven't already. Other than that, Awakened Realms has been busy putting together a new edition of Puerto Rico. They're going to be giving this one the same treatment that they did with Castles of Burgundy, so you can expect this one to look just as amazing. I did back Castles of Burgundy, and I thought that they did an amazing job on that one. Not only did they just do a great job reimagining the game in a deluxeified form, but I think they just did such a great job on the way that they split up the campaign and the way that they offered all the components, and they weren't strong-holding you into getting all the miniatures or anything like that, which is really nice, especially since a lot of these upgrades are more for aesthetics and can sometimes make the game a little bit more fiddly. So if you'd rather have a more streamlined game, which I would, that is an option, and they're not forcing you to get the miniatures. I'm not sure exactly how this is going to work with Puerto Rico. I'm not super familiar with this game, so I'll definitely be trying to get this one to the table before the campaign launches, so I know whether or not this is one that I'll want to back. But speaking of Castles of Burgundy, if you did miss out on that previous campaign, they just announced that they are going to be doing a reprint, which is awesome because this game is an amazing game, and I think a lot of people are kicking themselves for missing the campaign, like I was, but unfortunately for me, I did already buy it on the secondhand market, but for anyone else that didn't want to pay those secondhand market prices, this is another opportunity to get your hands on it. And I did comb through the page here to see if they added anything new. I'm sure there will be some new things added, and hopefully they do fix some of the tiny issues that did exist with the previous version of this game, like the trays not exactly aligning with the boards. Small gripe, but I do notice it every time I play. This is a great game, and I definitely recommend checking it out, and if you don't want to miss out on it, you can go ahead and follow along right now to get notified once it launches. Other than all that, I do just want to mention a few games that I did miss covering in the previous weeks that I think you might be interested in. Cascadia, Rolling Rivers, and Rolling Hills has just launched a couple weeks ago, and this is a roll and write version of Cascadia, which is a lightweight tile placement game. It's a game that a lot of people love, so I just wanted to mention it and let you know that there is a roll and write version of the game, and it's only 20 bucks. And there's also a Button Shy reprint campaign that has a whole bunch of the Button Shy games, so if there were any games that you're hoping to get your hand on, especially if they're out of print, this is another chance to grab those. As always, I do like to give a quick mention to Alex over at BoardGameCo because we do work together keeping track of all these upcoming campaigns, and if you do like these videos, you'll definitely want to check out his because he puts out a similar video at the start of each month, letting you know of the heavy hitters for that month. But if you're looking for even more games, definitely go ahead and check out ZillaBlitz because he does a similar video, but it's more focused on the historical war games, so if that is a niche that you're into, he does fantastic work, and he has a ton of other videos covering that same genre of games if you do want to learn more. And I do just want to mention one more creator here that I haven't ever mentioned before, but I've been watching him for a few weeks now, and I think he does fantastic work. And if you are looking for that comprehensive picture of all the games coming out each and every week, not just the games for Kickstarter, you'll definitely want to check him out, and his channel is called QVO Games, and he goes over all the retail games coming out each and every week. And one of the reasons that I want to recommend his channel is because I think he does take a very similar approach to describing the games as I do. There isn't a whole lot of fluff, and it's very info based, so if you just want to get straight into the games and figure out if there's any that you might be interested coming to retail, I will have a link to his channel in the description below, and you can check him out and subscribe if you do like his content. But that's all I got for an intro, and we do have some exciting games this week, so let's check them out. And the first campaign we have is for Cosmos Empires, as well as a brand new expansion called the Culture Clash expansion. And this is a game for 2 to 8 players. It takes about 15 to 45 minutes to play. And this is a really fun little game where players are going to be rolling dice on their turn. They're going to be adding the value of those dice together, but then that value that they add up to is going to be activating any of the cards in your tableau that match that value. The catch here is that it's also going to be activating everybody else's cards as well that match that value, but you do have a few actions at your disposal to modify the value of the die to try and change it to maybe something that benefits you more than your opponents. And of course, when they do get activated, they're going to be generating you the income that those cards provide. And you do have other actions that you can do to get more cards into your tableau or trade cards from your tableau with other cards from the deck. The whole goal of the game is to be the first player to get a certain amount of credits, so if you're able to do that, then you win the game. But this new expansion is going to be adding a bunch more content into the mix. First off, it's just going to be expanding the amount of cards available, but it's also going to be adding a few new modules that you can mix into the game, like the culture cards, which are cards that you're going to be starting the game with, but they're going to give you some special abilities and they can only be activated once per game. So anytime that you want to take advantage of those abilities, you'll be revealing them to use that ability. There's also a patrol mechanism that's going to allow you to reserve some cards in advance, even if you can't afford them yet, to make sure that you're getting the cards that you want. But like I said, there's going to be a bunch of new cards and decks that you'll be able to add and mix into the game. But there's also going to be some cards that could have multiple options or effects as well when they get activated. And if this one does sound interesting to you, definitely check it out. I'll have it linked in the description below. And launching on March 4th, we have Galactic Cruise. And this plays 1 to 4 players. It takes about 90 to 150 minutes to play. And this one does look like a ton of fun, so it's no surprise that this one is our Discord pick of the week. But this one is also my own personal pick of the week as well, because I think this one's got a lot of really cool mechanisms, and I think it's offering something a little bit more unique that I haven't seen with too many other games. But at the core of this game, it is a worker placement game, and the goal of this game is to try and get the most victory points at the end of 3 rounds. The way that you're doing that is by operating different cruise ships that are going into space. But the way that the rounds work in this game is that every time that you actually launch a ship into space, and any time that you complete one of the objectives of the game, you're going to be adding a cube onto these little progress trackers. Once they fill up, it's going to trigger a few different events and scoring to happen, but after that happens 3 times, that's going to be triggering the end of the game. But like I said, this is a worker placement game, and this is a non-blocking worker placement game, which means that you can put your worker where another player has put their worker, but when you do that, they do get a small benefit and then their worker goes back to them. But what's really cool about this is that all of these different locations are actually just modular tiles. So every time you set up this game, you're going to have different pairings of actions in the different locations out on the board. But also what makes this one very unique is this has a really cool mechanism where you can actually build these little connections between worker placement locations. And what that allows you to do is to use a worker placement location adjacent to you up to 2 connections away if you are able to build those connections between those locations. And that is really nice because for every worker that you put out on the board, you're actually able to take 2 actions. So if you have no connections in place, that means wherever you place your worker, you're going to be taking the 2 actions there, but as soon as you place these connections, you can start to take those actions between 2 different locations. And another detail with this is that if you don't have a connection in place, you can actually pay your opponents in order to use their connections. So this is just a really cool idea that seems like a lot of fun that I haven't really seen I haven't seen it in any other games. But like I said, the whole goal here is to try to get the most victory points by building spaceships, loading them with passengers, and then sending them off into space in order to get those rewards. And there's a bunch of different actions you can take. Of course, there's actions to gain different parts of the ship, and then there's also actions to piece them together. And the different ship parts can have preferences to certain passengers types, which do give you bonuses if you're able to get those passengers on your ship. But of course, you're also going to need resources in order to launch your ship. You're going to need food, oxygen, and fuel, and there are locations to get those. But you'll also need to schedule your trip in order to make it happen, which is one of the actions. It's going to let you gain one of these tiles here, which is going to grant you with different benefits depending on the different icons that that tile depicts. And this is going to go at the top of your ship. And when you do take the action to actually launch your ship, you're going to be dedicating one of your workers to that ship, which means that that worker is going to have to go through a series of sequences in order for that ship to launch. And then your worker is actually going to be moving through the different icons on that scheduled trip, gaining the benefits for each of those icons. There are also all sorts of upgrades that you can gain on your own personal player board as well. We're going to be tracking all your developments and any bonuses that you gain throughout the game. And there is also an action that allows you to recruit additional workers to your board so that you have even more workers and more actions that you can take on your turn. The game continues like this over those 3 rounds, and the player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game. And if you do want to check this one out, I'll have it linked in the description below. And launching on March 5th, we have Etherstone, and this plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 30 to 60 minutes to play. And this is a competitive card battler where players are going to be building up their tableau of cards and then drafting die in order to activate those cards. But the way that the game works is that each player is going to be drafting 7 cards at the start of the game, and you're also going to be choosing a leader card. This is going to determine some of your special abilities that you have access to, as well as your starting resources. But the goal of this game is to have the most victory points at the end of the game, and the end of the game can be triggered in a few different ways. Either those victory point tokens have all completely run out and there is a limited pool of them, or the threat deck is completely empty, which is a deck of cards that has a bunch of different enemies that any player can fight for different benefits, or when a single player has played all their 7 drafted cards out into their tableau. The way the game plays is that all the dice are going to be rolled, and then on a player's turn they have a few different options for actions that they can take. They can draft one of the die, which will allow them to activate certain cards in their tableau depending on the value or color of that die. But most of these cards will have special abilities or actions, but a lot of them will generate you different types of resources that you can use to perform one of your other actions that allow you to play additional cards into your tableau. But like I said, one of your actions is to attack one of the threat cards. And there's going to be a few of these cards out on display, and in order to attack these cards, you're going to be exhausting any of your cards in your tableau in order to contribute strength to that attack. For any amount that you're short in defeating them, you're going to be taking hit points equal to that amount, and you're not eliminated if you run out of health in this game, but you are going to be gaining a token that's negative victory points at the end of the game. Then you're going to be resetting your health back to its starting amount. The cards that you exhausted can still be used as normal like any other card. The only thing that they can't be used for is to attack another threat, but there is an action that allows you to rest to unexhaust any of your exhausted cards. But the game offers a ton of different cards that can help you in a variety of ways, and the game just continues like this until one of those end game triggers are hit. And then at that point, the player with the most victory points wins the game. And if you are interested in this one, you can check it out. I'll have it linked in the description below. And launching on March 5th, we have NEXUS, the Unsanctioned expansion. This plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 60 to 120 minutes to play. And this is an expansion to the game NEXUS Arena Combat, which, if you're not familiar with it, is a competitive game where players are each going to be managing their own team of gladiators, except these aren't your usual gladiators because these are mutated monstrosities. And this game actually has a couple different aspects to it, because there's going to be the main chunk of the game where you're actually fighting against your opponent, and you're going to be fighting with your mutants against your opponents. And because these are somewhat uncontrollable mutants, they may not always do what you want them to do, which is a fun aspect of this game. But because you're playing as the manager, there's actually more that you can do actually outside of the combat, because there's a few different things you can put into motion before the battle in order to rig certain aspects to your advantage, or to put your opponent in a position where they have to make some poor decisions. But like I said, this new campaign is going to be introducing a new expansion to this game, and this expansion is going to be adding a few different modules into the game. There's going to be the hostile entities, which are going to be adding some different monsters that will enter into the arena and be threats to both you and your opponent. But then there's also going to be the mutation cards, which you can use to assign to your different mutants in order to move them through different mutated states and kind of change the way that they operate throughout the progression of the battle. Of course, there's going to be brand new different types of fighters that you can introduce into the game. There's just going to be a bunch more content added with this expansion that you can just mix right in. But then there's also going to be a bunch of new hazards and barriers and traps that are just going to be adding a little bit of variety into the actual arena where the players are going to be fighting. This is actually a game that I've covered a few times with the original launch, but then they also did release a campaign expansion that allows you to play through a legacy campaign, which looks like a ton of fun and offers a variety of different modes of play and also improves different aspects of the game as well. But instead of just going through all of that again, I'll just go ahead and roll my previous footage for you, where I also rolled the previous footage to that. We're getting into the board game inception with this one, but if it does look interesting to you, I will have a link to the campaign in the description below. And of course, you can click that notify me button if you want to get notified once it launches. and this new expansion is going to be adding a brand new legacy campaign to that original game. But this new expansion is essentially all encompassed with a single rulebook, because within this rulebook it's going to offer you all sorts of campaigns and storylines for players to explore. But then also there's portions of the book where you're going to be making different decisions or recording the results of different games that's going to change the way that the game plays moving forward. It doesn't look like you're destroying any components other than this rulebook by playing through this legacy campaign, so if you wanted to record your different results in a separate notebook and just keep this one pristine, that would allow you to reuse this in order to play multiple campaigns. Not only that, but it looks like this new rulebook is going to be including some new ideas and concepts that you'll be able to mix into the original game, and they did also take feedback from their player base, and it looks like they're going to be including some refreshed rules as part of this, with some rules clarifications and small tweaks just to make the gameplay a little bit better. And this was a game that I thought looked like a ton of fun when it originally launched, so it's nice to see them improving it even more. And if you do want to know how this one plays, I'll go ahead and roll that previous footage for you now. And this is a head-to-head skirmish game where each player is going to be controlling their own team of gladiators, but these aren't just regular gladiators, these are actually mindless genetic freaks. And each player is going to have some combination of skills across 3 different areas, which is their command, their influence, and their deception. And the command allows players to give their elite gladiators some special abilities, while their influence allows them to access bribes and other nefarious deeds in order to influence cards before the battle. And then your deception allows you to force your opponent into making some poor decisions. And this game also has a really interesting take on combat because it has story-driven combat where the events and cards that you play will create a bit of a story that will make each game unique from the one before. And the game offers a few different arenas to play on, with each one representing a poorly maintained space barge, each with their own hazards that you can take advantage of or avoid, as well as some loot crates to gain some extra weapons. And each round, players are going to be taking turns spending their command points in order to influence their gladiators to make certain actions, but the gladiators do have a mind of their own and they may not always listen. The team with the last gladiator standing is going to win the battle, but the player with the most fame at the end of the game wins the game. Also launching on the 5th, we have the Harry Potter miniature adventure game Wizarding Duels, which is a game for 2 players. It takes about 40 to 60 minutes to play. And the way that this game works is that each player is going to have a set amount of points that they can spend in order to recruit characters onto their team, with each of those characters having a certain point cost, as well as asymmetrical stats and abilities and a number of items that can be equipped to them, as well as a spell affiliation that's going to determine which types of spells that they're able to perform. But something that's cool about the spells in this game is that each player is going to be building up their own tableau of spells, and the amount of spells that you're allowed to have is going to be equal to the total spell mastery that you have across your characters. These spells are going to be shared across all of your characters, but like I said before, in order to perform a spell, you're going to have the matching affiliation, which is why you might want to have certain synergies between your team so that more of your spells can be shared across them. But when you do perform a spell, it's going to be going into a cooldown, but there's going to be all sorts of different spells that can help you attack, defend, or even power up other spells or have various other effects. Of course, the game does offer some different potions and items as well that players will be able to use to get certain benefits or abilities in addition to their spells. But something else that is interesting about this game is that the combat in this game does not use any dice at all. Instead, whenever you perform a spell, it's going to have a required point value, and you're going to be drawing a card from a deck. That card is going to have some value associated with it, but if it's not enough to perform the spell, you can actually use cards from your hand to add to the point value that you drew in order to add up to the amount you need. The cards are reusable, and there are ways to get even more of these cards into your hand, but once you use them, you can't use them again until you use an action to refresh them. But one of the main reasons that they're using cards here instead of rolling dice is because each of these cards will also have a special ability or action on them as well, in addition to the value that they have, which is going to give you some different options and benefits when you do perform a spell. The way that players actually win this game is by getting the most victory points, and one of the best ways to do that is to complete your quest cards, and players are going to have a stack of these cards, but you're just going to have a few out on display at a time. The cool thing about these objective cards is that there's a whole ton of them, but they're all categorized into different types, but you're only going to have one of each type in your quest deck, which means that you're going to have a lot of variety from game to game, but then you're also going to have a lot of variety within a game since you're only completing one of each type. This can mean controlling certain areas of the board, performing certain actions, or just creating certain states in order to gain those victory points. And like I said, once you complete it, you're going to be cashing that in and replacing it with a new one from the stack. The game continues like this over a number of rounds, and then the player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game. And if you are interested in this one, you can go ahead and check it out, and I'll have it linked in the description below. Also launching on March 5th, we have Meeple Inc, and this plays 1 to 6 players. It takes about 40 to 120 minutes to play. And this is a game where each player is going to be playing as a different board game publisher, trying to create and publish games. And this is a worker placement game at its core, and you're going to have a main board with a bunch of different worker placement spots in order for you to gain the different resources like inspiration, time, or money, as well as the needed skills and mechanisms, box art, and components in order to put those games together. Players start the game with a few basic workers that are going to allow them to start making progress towards their goals. But like I said, there's a bunch of different actions in this game, and some of those actions are just going to be helping you gain the different resources that I just mentioned. But there are other actions that actually allow you to recruit new specialists onto your team by gaining one of their employee cards. Once you actually have an employee card, there's another action that you can perform in order to play it to your table. And this is where all your ideas come together and you start creating one of your games that you're going to be publishing. But what's cool about this is that each of these employees can have different abilities and specialties, and whenever you assign them to the table, you're going to be gaining the associated benefit at that table, but you're also going to be gaining them as a new worker, and you'll be able to put them out on the board, taking advantage of their special abilities to get certain bonuses if you use them for particular actions. Not only this, but there's also actions that can gain you skill cards that you can use to further upgrade your specialists. And then there's also just cards that can grant you with different special actions. But one of the main actions that you're going to be performing in this game is to actually get a board game box that you're going to be putting in the center of your table. You can only have one of these at a time, but once you have that box in front of you, you're going to be using your employees in order to try and get the appropriate mechanisms and components in order to make that game worth as much as possible. Different components and mechanisms will require different skill sets of your employees, with, of course, the more difficult ones being worth a little bit more. This means that the more you invest into a game, the more it's going to be worth, but there is a little bit of an optimization problem here since you can only work on one game at a time. You might just want to get one out of the door so that you can get the benefits of that game and then move on to your next one as you're building up your engine, which is going to allow you to make that next game a little bit easier. Once you actually complete a game, you'll be able to choose the box cover to close it up and lock in those victory points, but there are also some different objectives that players can try to complete by getting certain combinations of box, mechanism, and component, which will allow them to complete certain challenges in order to gain additional rewards and victory points. Another thing that's neat about the worker placement in this game is that players don't automatically get their workers back at the end of the round. Instead, there's a specific action that players can perform in order to get all their workers back. But anytime that you do this, you're going to be moving the hourglass backwards on the score track, which is going to be speeding up the end of the game. But also, anytime that you get your workers back, you also get to use prediction cards to try and predict the actions that you think your opponents are going to take. This is why it's always important to pay attention to your competitors in the market, because if your predictions are correct and your opponents use the actions that you predicted them to before the next time that you call back your workers, then you're going to be gaining some additional benefits for that round. This means that you might want to stretch out your actions to try and let that happen, but if your predictions are really good and those actions happen very quickly, then that just gives you more freedom to call back your workers a little bit sooner. But the game continues like this over a series of rounds, and the player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game. And if you are interested in this one, you can check it out. I'll have it linked down below. Also launching on the 5th, we have Ready, Set, Bet, the High Roller Edition. This plays 2 to 9 players. It takes about 45 to 60 minutes to play. And this is a game all about racing horses and making bets and trying to have the most money at the end of the game. Like I said, this is the High Roller Edition, so there's going to be a bunch of deluxeifications to the game. I'm sure there'll also be a few new modules and expansions included as well. But something that I do want to say about this game is that this one is also going to be my own personal pick of the week. I'm picking 2 this week because this game is awesome, my other pick was awesome, and something that I think is really special about this game is that it's not that hard to explain or play, but this game gives you quite an experience. If you want to feel like you are at the horse races, this game delivers on its theme. I am really impressed with this game every time I play it, and I think it's a ton of fun. And the fact that it plays such a large player count really carves itself out for a very special spot in your collection. But like I said, the way that this game works is very simple, and this game is a bit of a real-time game because someone's just going to be rolling 2 dice repeatedly and then adding them together, and then whatever value that is, it's going to be moving the associated horse forward. The cool thing about this is that if you roll the same value consecutively, it actually gives that horse a bonus, but the bonus varies depending on which horse it is, because probabilistically the 7 is the most likely value to roll whenever you're rolling 2 die. But that one actually gives you no bonus for rolling that value repeatedly, whereas the more unlikely values will give you a significant bonus. So even though the 7 might be further ahead and making steady progress, you could end up rolling some other values twice in a row and getting huge boons up on that racetrack. And like I said, this is a real-time game because at any point during the race, players can bet on the different locations out on the betting board. You're essentially going to be betting on which horses you think are going to be coming in first, second, or third, but there are some other states that you can bet on as well. But something that's important to note about this board is that each location can only be occupied by one player's tokens, and each player is going to have 5 tokens that they'll be able to use each and every round, with each of them being valued from 1 to 5. This means that your most valuable value of 5, you're going to be wanting to be very certain of where you put that one, and you can actually get quite a lot of money from these bets, because if you're putting that 5 token on one of these larger multiples, that's going to be getting you a ton more points. But each of these locations can also have some negative consequences as well if you happen to guess incorrectly. So this creates a really fun dynamic where you do want to be very certain of where you put your tokens, but you don't want to wait too long, because if another player puts their token there first, then that space is off limits. And also, all the players have to get all their bets in before 3 horses cross this red line, and if you don't have tokens out at that point, then you're just not going to be able to make those bets. The entire game plays over 4 races, but between each race, players are going to be dealt 2 ability cards, and then you're going to be choosing one to keep for the following rounds. These can give you additional tokens or ways that you can side bet, and if you wanted to extend or shorten the game, I don't see any reason why you couldn't take some races away or add additional races to make it a bit longer. But I am personally really excited about this one, and if you're looking for a game that gets everyone yelling and screaming and rooting for their horses, just like a real day out at the races, this is definitely one that I want to check out, and I do recommend it. And of course, you can click that notify me button if you want to get notified once it launches. And that is everything I have for you this week, but don't leave yet because we still got an awesome giveaway to announce, and these are the easiest giveaways to enter ever. All you got to do is leave a comment down below, and that'll get you entered in this giveaway. And this one is going to be for a pledge for Chroma Arcana, and this is a tactical card game where players are going to be trying to be the first to eliminate their opponent by getting their health down to 0. The way the game works is that each player is going to have their own character card, which is going to grant them with a special ability. Then they're also going to have their own unique spell card that they'll always have access to on their board. Players are going to be taking turns playing different spell cards into their board in order to gain those benefits. There's benefits that can happen instantly, ongoingly, or be triggered by other events in the game. But in order to play those cards, you're going to have to discard a certain number of cards of the matching color from your hand. This means that your cards are going to be doubling as the spells, but also your resources in order to activate those spells. This means that you'll also have to pick and choose which of the spells you think are going to be giving you your best chance of success, and which ones you're going to have to sacrifice in order to utilize those. And this giveaway is going to be for the solo co-op bundle pledge, which is going to get you a copy of the core game, as well as all unlocked stretch goals, and also the expansion that allows you to play this game cooperatively or as a solo experience. All you got to do to enter this giveaway is leave a comment down below with the hashtag Chroma, and you can say anything that you want, but if you're looking for something in particular, maybe you could let us know what color you normally try to go for whenever you play a board game. For myself, I usually end up as the red player, but normally I just let everyone else pick their colors first and then I get the leftover. But anytime that I see a game that has more of the obscure colors like white, orange, purple, or black, which you don't see in too many games, I usually do try to snipe one of those just to get a little bit of variety in life. Good luck in the giveaway, but now let's go ahead and draw the winners for last week's giveaways. And the giveaways we had for last week was a pledge for Biome, as well as a pledge for Boardquest Tales of Liria. And we're going to draw for Biome first. And to draw a winner, I use this application here. All these extra names down here are bonus entries for my supporters over on Ko-fi, which is a similar platform as Patreon. It's just a little bit nicer to its creators. So if you do like all the effort that I put into these videos and you want to help make these efforts a little bit more sustainable for me, I really do appreciate it. And you can find a link to that in the description below. It also gets you some bonus entries into these giveaways. But let's go ahead and draw those comments and draw a winner. And the winner of Biome is Miles Tavin. Congratulations on the win. I'll reach out to you and let you know that you just won yourself a pledge for Biome. But now let's go ahead and draw a winner for Boardquest Tales of Liria. Let's grab those comments and draw a winner. And the winner for Tales of Liria is PDA Photo, and this is another winner from Ko-fi, so congratulations on the win. I'll reach out to you and let you know that you just won yourself a sweet pledge. And that's everything I have for you this week. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and I hope there's a couple games there that caught your interest. Definitely a few for me, especially with Ready, Set, Bet, as well as Galactic Cruise. Definitely would love to back both of those if the budget does allow it, which has been pretty tight lately. But now that I'm seeing more and more games catching my interest, it's some good motivation to try and sell some of those games that I don't get to the table often enough and bring in some revenue to get new ones. I do have a few games to get rid of, I just haven't bothered to post them yet, but cleaning up the place, getting some new games in potentially, as well as finding them a new home is effort, but I'll do it. But that's it for an episode, and as always, thanks so much for tuning in. I really do appreciate it, and I hope the video provided some value. But until next time, just remember, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.